The heavy sound of a lock clicking echoed through the silent hallway, sending a chill down her spine. She turned quickly, her hand instinctively reaching for the door, but it wouldn't budge. Panic rose in her chest as she knocked, then pounded harder, her voice trembling as she called out his name. "Please, what are you doing?" Her words were met with nothing but cold silence. Just moments ago, she had trusted him, believed in the life they were building together, especially now that she carried his child. But as reality began to sink in, confusion twisted into fear. This wasn't a mistake. This wasn't temporary. This was deliberate. Her breathing grew uneven as she stepped back, one hand protectively resting over her stomach. The walls felt closer, suffocating, as the weight of betrayal crushed her spirit. She called out again, louder this time, desperation breaking through her voice, but no one came. No footsteps, no answers, just silence. In that moment, she realized she was completely alone. What he saw as control would soon become the beginning of something he could never contain. She had always been the kind of woman who carried warmth wherever she went, the kind who believed in love not as a fleeting emotion, but as something steady and enduring. Even now, in the quiet moments before everything changed, her thoughts often drifted to the life growing inside her. She would gently place her hand over her stomach, smiling softly as she imagined tiny hands, first words, and the sound of laughter filling a home she had always dreamed of building. Motherhood, to her, was not just a responsibility. It was a blessing she had longed for with all her heart. She came from a modest background, raised in a home where love was simple but genuine. There were no luxuries, but there was always care, always understanding. When she met her husband, she believed she had found not only love but also security, a future where she would never have to worry again. He was powerful, confident, and seemed to offer everything she once lacked. She trusted him completely, never questioning his intentions, never imagining that the same man could become the source of her deepest pain. Beneath her gentle nature, however, was a quiet strength that even she did not fully recognize. She had endured struggles before, learned to be patient, to persevere. And though her heart now carried the weight of betrayal, that hidden resilience remained within her, waiting for the moment it would be needed most. From the outside, he was the kind of man people admired, powerful, successful, and always in control. His presence commanded respect, and his name carried weight in every room he entered. But beneath that polished image was a man driven by arrogance and an overwhelming need to dominate everything around him. Control was not just a preference for him, it was an obsession. There had been signs before, subtle at first. The way his tone would shift when she spoke to someone too long, the quiet disapproval in his eyes whenever she made decisions without him, the way he insisted on knowing where she was at all times. What once felt like concern slowly revealed itself as possessiveness. He valued reputation above all else, constantly worried about how others perceived him, how perfect his life appeared from the outside. When she became pregnant, instead of bringing him closer, it awakened something darker. Doubt crept into his mind, questions about timing, control, and inheritance. The idea of losing authority over his carefully constructed life unsettled him. In his distorted thinking, locking her away was not cruelty but necessity. He convinced himself it was the only way to protect his name, his power, and what he believed was rightfully his, no matter the cost. Days blurred into nights inside the locked space, where silence became both her enemy and her only companion. At first, the loneliness felt unbearable, pressing down on her chest until it was hard to breathe. Every creak of the walls, every distant sound made her flinch, reminding her that she was cut off from the world she once knew. The fear was constant, especially as her body grew heavier with pregnancy, each movement slower, each breath more deliberate. There was no one to guide her, no comforting voice to ease her worries, no reassurance that she or her baby would be safe. Food was limited, delivered without a word, forcing her to ration every bite carefully. She learned quickly that survival depended on discipline and patience. She counted hours by the shifting light, created routines just to keep her mind from unraveling. Despite the isolation, she refused to let despair consume her. Each time weakness crept in, she would sit quietly, one hand resting over her stomach, grounding herself in the life she carried. There were moments when tears would fall uncontrollably, when the weight of betrayal and fear became too much to bear. In those moments, she would whisper softly to her unborn child, her voice trembling yet filled with determination. She made promises that she would endure, that she would protect them no matter what, that this darkness would not define their future. Slowly, something within her began to change. The fragile woman who once depended on love and security was learning to rely on her own strength. Every day she survived became a quiet victory. Every moment endured a step closer to something greater. And though she remained trapped, her spirit was no longer confined, growing stronger with each passing day. There came a moment when her strength began to slip, when the weight of everything she had endured finally caught up with her. One night, her body felt unbearably weak, her head spinning as she struggled to stay upright. The air felt heavier than usual, and even breathing became a challenge. She sank slowly to the floor, clutching her stomach as fear rushed through her veins. For the first time since being locked away, doubt filled her mind completely. What if she couldn't survive this? What if her baby couldn't survive this? Tears streamed down her face as exhaustion and despair took over. She questioned everything, her choices, her trust, the life she thought she had built. The silence around her felt louder than ever, almost suffocating, as if it was closing in to swallow her whole. For a brief, terrifying moment, she felt herself giving up, her hopes slipping through her fingers. But then, in the stillness, she felt a small movement within her. It was faint but enough. Her breath caught, and her hand pressed gently against her stomach. That single moment changed everything. She wasn't alone. She couldn't afford to be weak. Slowly, she wiped her tears, forcing herself to sit up despite the pain. Something stronger rose within her, a quiet but unshakable determination. She would not be his victim. She would fight, no matter how broken she felt, because now she had something far more important to live for. She began to watch everything more carefully, the timing of footsteps outside, the faint sound of keys, the pattern of when food was brought, and when silence stretched the longest. What once felt like a prison slowly became something she studied, memorized, and understood. Every small detail mattered. Every second counted. She knew she wouldn't get many chances, maybe only one. One evening, as the door opened just slightly to slide food inside, she noticed something different. The lock wasn't fully secured. Her heart began to race, but she forced herself to stay still, pretending nothing had changed. Hours passed, each second dragging as she waited for the right moment. Fear whispered that it could be a trap, that she might fail, but determination pushed louder. When the house finally fell silent, she moved. Her hands trembled as she reached for the door, her breath shallow, every sound amplified in the darkness. Slowly, carefully, she turned the handle. For a moment, it resisted. Then it gave way. She stepped out, her legs weak but her will unbreakable. Each step felt like a risk, every shadow a threat, but she didn't stop. She couldn't. Not now. Not when freedom was within reach. That night, she chose courage over fear, and everything changed. The world outside felt unfamiliar at first, almost overwhelming after the silence and confinement she had endured. Every sound seemed louder, every light brighter, as if life itself had been waiting for her return. Exhausted and weak, she wandered until her strength nearly gave out, but fate led her to a place she never expected. A small shelter run by kind strangers who saw not just her condition, but her pain. They didn't ask too many questions at first. They simply helped. For the first time in what felt like forever, she was given warmth without fear, food without conditions, and care without control. It was in those quiet, safe moments that she began to breathe again, not just physically, but emotionally. The woman who once trembled behind locked doors slowly began to stand taller. With each passing day, she regained not only her strength, but also pieces of herself she thought were lost forever. She started to speak again, to smile faintly, to believe that life could be more than survival. The people around her encouraged her, reminding her that she was not defined by what had been done to her. She began to prepare for the arrival of her child with hope instead of fear, imagining a future built on love, not control. What once broke her became the very thing that reshaped her. She was no longer just a victim. She was a survivor, growing stronger, braver, and more independent with every new step forward. Meanwhile, the life he had worked so hard to control began to slip through his fingers in ways he never expected. At first, he believed everything was still under his command, that no one would question his decisions or look too closely at what had happened behind closed doors. But whispers started to spread, quiet at first, then louder, more persistent. People began to notice her absence, to ask questions he could not easily answer. His carefully crafted image, once admired and respected, started to crack. Business associates grew distant, their trust shaken by rumors of his behavior. Invitations stopped coming. Conversations turned cold. The same reputation he had tried so desperately to protect was now the very thing unraveling him. Then came the consequences he could no longer avoid. Legal pressure mounted, forcing him to confront the reality of his actions. For the first time, he was no longer in control. The power he once held over others meant nothing when faced with accountability. But perhaps the greatest punishment was the silence that followed. The house he once dominated now felt empty, lifeless. There was no one left to control, no one left to impress. As his world collapsed piece by piece, hers was quietly rebuilding, stronger, freer, and far beyond his reach. When their paths finally cross again, it is nothing like the past he once controlled. She stands before him changed, no longer the frightened, obedient woman he left behind. Her eyes carry calm strength, not fear. He tries to speak, to justify, to reclaim some sense of authority over the situation, but his words fall empty. She listens silently, not because she is weak, but because she no longer feels the need to react to his control. In that silence, everything is answered. She makes her choice with quiet certainty. Whether she walks away without looking back or tells him directly that he no longer has a place in her life, the message is the same. She is free. The emotional weight of the moment is not in anger, but in release. For the first time, she feels no chains, no shadows of his power. Only peace. Time passes, and her life takes a completely new shape. She is no longer defined by the darkness she survived, but by the strength she built from it. As a mother, she finds a purpose deeper than pain, a reason to keep moving forward, to protect, to love, and to build a safe world for her child. Every challenge she once faced becomes a lesson that now guides her decisions. She stands on her own, independent and respected, earning admiration not because of who she was married to, but because of who she has become. The fear that once controlled her has been replaced with confidence and quiet resilience. People around her see not a broken woman, but a strong individual who rebuilt herself from nothing. Looking back, she understands that her suffering was not her ending, but her beginning. It shaped her into someone unbreakable, someone who learned the true meaning of self-worth. The past still exists in memory, but it no longer holds power over her. What remains is growth, courage, and the unshakable belief that she is enough, on her own, and always has been. In the end, life surprises her in ways she never imagined. Just when she thought healing was enough, an unexpected opportunity opens a new path, one filled with purpose, stability, and quiet happiness. A kind soul who once offered her help becomes a lasting source of support, not as someone to save her, but someone who believes in her strength. Together, they help her rebuild not just a life, but a future defined by dignity and hope. Her story becomes one of inspiration, showing others that even after deep betrayal, life can still bloom again. She no longer looks back with fear, but with understanding. The past no longer defines her. It only reminds her of how far she has come. He thought he buried her life behind locked doors, but she turned the key and walked into a future he could never control.